I've owned this car for 11 years. It's got about 14,000 miles on it. Half of them I've probably done. I'm not a mechanic. I'm mechanically inclined. I've followed the replica car industry for 36 years, visited 3 kit car manufacturers and builders over the years, interviewed and talked to fellow owners and builders of cars. So do I think you could daily a replica? With some consequences. The car has to be safe. Replicas don't always meet daily driver standards. Whether it's a custom tube chassis like this or a stretched Fiero, it has to be robust enough to withstand the daily driver use. It has to have good bones. Mine's a custom tube chassis, and I do an annual inspection on it, checking areas of the cars for cracks, chip paint, signs of something going sideways. And I do that every year along with the nut and bolt check just to make sure it's all good. I'm looking for leaks, things like that, right? And cleaning it as I go. If I find something, which more often than not, I do find a leak or something like that. Sometimes they've been there for a while, sometimes not. If a custom tube chassis is robust enough for daily use, I don't see why you couldn't use it. The cost of maintaining a replica over the real deal is really the advantage to it. So it is more cost effective than the real deal to daily drive. This replica is heavily based on GM components. As you can see, the engine has a LT1 out of a 93 vet. A lot of the suspension components are made from GM sources. I think it's Grand Dam in the front and front drive of an Olds Tornado, I think. In the rear, and steering linkage is, and the column is all Corvette. I think it's a Fiero rack that's in it, and the electrical system, ECU, things like that, are all GM based. This makes maintaining way more cost effective and easier, knowing that some stock components in the car. However, if you're not mechanically inclined, you still need to take it into a dealer. This can pose some problems. A replica is considered a custom. So for that reason, you can't take it to a GM dealer. Yes, many of the components are GM based, but it's not a GM built car. A car like this would have to go to a custom shop, one of those hot rod shops or a tuner shop, places like that to get fixed or repaired if you couldn't do it yourself. And their rates are probably going to be the same as a dealer or even higher than what a dealer is. And they're probably going to take a little longer because it's custom. You're not going from a book like a dealer would to be able to figure out and diagnose things. Budgeting too for the cost of a repair is quite different with these cars. You don't have a pre-built booked rate that you can get a quote from, let's say a hot rod shop or a tuner shop, to fix something that's wrong. And the diagnosing is completely different than, say, a stock GM dealership. It's going to take a whole lot longer, so you're paying booked time, and the time is whatever time it takes. So it's typically going to be longer. And because it's going to be longer, it's going to cost more. Once you do get to know your mechanic or somebody that's working with the car, either the hot rod shop or it's a tuner shop, whatever it is, they will start to learn more with the car, and it does get better over time. When I first got the car, I did take it to a couple of buddies that I knew and local in the area, and I each had them have a look at it and kind of get familiar with it. And they were more, they weren't hot rod shops, they were just kind of professional mechanics and had businesses here local, and I knew them, so I had a rapport with them. So I took it to them and had them help me in the early stages before I started wrenching on this car. That was about 10 years ago. So with them, I had a good starting point, but it wasn't like I could take the car to them and expect it the same day like you would at a dealer. It might be there 2, 3, 4 days for something simple, right? Because of those things I just mentioned. It takes them a little longer to figure it out, find the parts, etc. The reason it does take longer is because these parts that are built on this car are not documented. Now, some of the build kits you can buy, Factory 5, what have you, Ultima, they have a book and a parts list that you go by to assemble the cars. And now you've got a documented parts list for the build of the car. A custom replica like this doesn't have something like that. A custom mechanic or hot rod shop, or whatever you want to call it, the tuner, when they go looking for the part, once they've got the part off, there's no part number on that part. It's gonna be a trial or error trying to find the right part. I can remember helping the guys finding parts for this thing in the early days. And I would take it to a parts store, talk to the guys at the parts store saying this is what I needed. And a lot of times if they were busy, they had no time to kind of go in the back and see what they could find. Over time, what they do is either go there when it wasn't too busy, or the guys said, leave the part with me and I'll take a look when I get freed up. And that worked, but then again, just compared to what you normally would be doing for your daily driver to get parts, it's gonna take a lot longer to get you the parts. So in the background, again, you're gonna be waiting again for those parts and more time again without the car. And if it's your daily driver, you need a backup. This car, after 11 years, does show some signs of paint chips and things like that. The paint's holding up pretty good. It's starting to yellow just ahead. It's starting to go, but it's been out in the sun for 11 years. Now, a daily driver, this has got 11,000 miles on it, which is what a daily driver might do in half a year. Or a year. But the paint is taking a bit of a beating. Right now it's fiberglass. The paint on this is pretty good and it's pretty thick, but it still takes a beating, right? Can you imagine what the car would look like? Daily driven, twice as long on the road. This is 11 years. That's just gonna be 1 year for a daily. I've noticed over the years, things like hinges, in the front or in the hood or in the back hatch, things, the doors even, will start to move a little bit. As they get give over time, you'll start having in those close tolerance areas, some rubbing areas on the car. And, the hinges and the doors are pretty good. The front, I guess it's frunk, the hinges aren't very robust, right? And they replicate pretty close what's on the original. But it's still not long-term daily driver gonna hold up as well as what a hood latch is. They're quite different on this compared to the hood latch on a daily driver. Getting in and out of this car as a daily driver is a bit of a chore too. And I'm 50 plus years old and I can't jump in and out of this thing like I used to. If I was 10, 15 years younger, it would be a lot easier. But it's certainly not convenient getting in and out of this car every day. The seals on this car, when they were built as a replica, were not built in any way to be a daily driver. And so for instance, the seals around the doors, there are some areas in the doors where I can see outside and I can hear outside. And I don't worry about it too much, but when there's things like in daily driving, you're gonna have days of rain. For instance, there's not gutters like we're used to in this car, but the rain can get in past those seals. I've been caught out in the rain twice over the 11 years, and one was a pretty big downpour. And it came in through the top of the seals and down over the dash area. So this particular car is really not built for it. And that'd be something to look out for. If you're gonna daily drive a replica, that would be something you'd have to really pay attention to. It's those moments. The wiper, however, during those storms, did work remarkably well. I'm surprised how well it does work. And it doesn't clean off like as good in those high powered downpours like we're used to for a daily driver. But it does do pretty good. Because it's one wiper and it's one big wiper, it actually really clears the windshield way better than I thought it was gonna do. Repainting the car, the stone chip thing, or some of the scuffs are from the hinges and door seals, whatever, if those things, you need to repaint the car. It's not much different than what, a daily driver needs for getting repairs of paint and things like that. But if there's parts that need fixing along with the car as you're doing some of those repair work, that's where it can get tricky. Some of these parts are Lamborghini parts, original OEM parts. Up front, things like the grills, the lights, not too bad. You know, to either recreate or make them. Even though, you know, the shell for the light housing, you know, with the grid marks, you can get that material. It's not too bad of a big deal. But you get into, say, a windshield. You know, this is an OEM windshield on this one, and some of the a lot of our replicas have the real windshield. Even if you get a replica windshield, it could take some time to get them. The last I remember is every couple of years, somebody will do a run of them, you know, where you can buy a windshield. You might be waiting 6 months to a year to get that windshield. That could be a big problem. If you're using this thing as a daily, what are you gonna do while you're waiting for a windshield? Also, the cost of that windshield is probably 10 times what a typical windshield would cost. Now, it's still way better than, you know, the replica windshields that I've seen out there. It's actually not bad. I think they got up to 2,000 bucks, depending on how many are running at the time and who's all in on it, where they're shipping from, all that kind of stuff. For me, I'm in Canada, so everything's usually twice as much as everywhere else, but it's a hurdle. I've often thought of just grabbing a windshield, having a spare just for this car, just in case. And it's not a daily driver. The tires on this car are just like the OEM tires. These are the same things that we would buy for a real Countach over a replica. The trick with that is probably builds these tires, I think, once a year. Once they're gone, they're gone. You're waiting for them. So again, that's one of those things, you just buy some and have some spares. If you're dailying, you're gonna go through these tires a lot quicker compared to what they typically. Most of these tires date out because of the time, but tires, if you're daily driving this thing, you're gonna need them. Last time I checked, I think they're about $3 to do a full set. So they're not cheap, and it's definitely not the same cost as what a daily would be. Then you gotta worry about mechanical things that are custom to the car. For instance, this transaxle in this car is a Griffin gearbox. You know, if it goes, and I've had that problem. A few years ago, I did lose the input shaft, the bearing went on it. I knew it actually when I bought it. It was a historical problem. I didn't think it was fixed right when I bought it. And I knew it was probably gonna go, and it did 2 years after ownership. Problem with that is, it's a custom made gearbox by Griffin Gearbox. So I had to take that gearbox out, ship it to Texas, get it repaired, ship it back. And that took a while, you know, until that was probably a year and a half, almost 2 years. By the time I got it off the road, put it back on again. That's a long time. And if you're daily driving that thing, that's not gonna work. And usually every replica or a kit car has some custom components like that. Keep in mind, if you're in a minor accident, yeah, there's the hot rod shops. Some of those places would probably be able to rebuild it, work with the fiberglass that most cars are. But it's going to take a lot longer than what a typical collision shop would be. That repair is going to cost a lot more as well. There's a lot more custom fabrication in the repair work. And if you need those OEM parts to help with that, boy, it's going to be a while getting it fixed. Insuring the car as a daily driver is actually possible. In the first 2 years of this car's ownership, when I had it, I did do that. I could take it to work, share it with coworkers, and it was fun. I was able to do that. And one of the really good benefits of driving a car like this, especially a rush hour, is people just tend to peel out of your way. And that was interesting. I did enjoy doing that for a few years, but that was when, you know, things like stone chips and rocks and dump trucks all seem like weapons. You're constantly watching for that. Everything I've noted with the car and the concerns that I had, sure, they could be overcome. Some replicas are actually highly based on daily driver cars. So yeah, maybe you could have a better chance and less risk involved with driving one of those daily. But could you really something like this daily? Not really. You know, not without CAA on speed dial, and even with that, you have to make sure it's a flat track. You know, so it's just so many things. It just doesn't really make sense, right? It's I've seen some cars that have been taken over from previous owners where they tried or attempted to use it and they just got lost in the maintenance. It's just so many things that they can't catch up and stay up on the maintenance with the car. It's a real threat to a replica. But again, it depends how they're built, what type it is, and if you're mechanically inclined, then, and that's what you want to do, sure, it's a lot easier. That's all for now. Please like, subscribe, let's send a comment. I read all the comments. See ya.